when the Jaljiilja called for aid, written by Caden Elast. The Feck were an ancient race, one that had already retreated into a bubble of solitude long before most of the other races in the galaxy had taken their first primitive, unsteady steps into the wider universe. Why they did so was unknown. Perhaps they were merely watching, or perhaps they felt that the rest of the galaxy, the rest of the universe, had nothing to offer them. At some point, however, this stance changed. They began reaching out to their neighbors, offering their technology in exchange for servitude. Well, the Feck didn't appear to be able to advance their technology, having reached a point of stagnation eons ago. What they had to offer was still leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of the galaxy. And so most took the Feck up on the offer. The terms weren't terribly severe relative to some others, and they even acted as liberators for a few species. The Klumpnu welcomed them with open arms to be freed from their vulgar oppressors. The Kikwa were ecstatic to have an ally that could resist the Heotian rebels. Even those without their own threats, such as the Blivla, were happy to gain the technology the Feck offered. In this way, the Jaljiilja proved to be an outlier. Their people had once, according to ancient records, been among the most powerful in active galaxy. Perhaps at their height, they could have rivaled the Feck, at least with their numbers, if not their technology. However, the records speak of a scourge that diminished them and caused them to retreat behind their stoutest of defenses. The scourge had frightened the Jaljiilja so much that they refused to interact with the rest of the galaxy. As a result, when the Feck's influence eventually reached them, they were rebuffed with the same as any other. The Feck did not take this lightly. Armies were raised, fleets were constructed, and war was declared. If the Jaljiilja would not join the collective that was being created by the Feck, they would be annihilated. That they would still refuse, even facing overwhelming odds, should have been a warning. But for reasons not really well understood in the current era, the Jaljiilja were despised by the rest of the galaxy. So all involved parties turned a blind eye to it. At first, we feared that it would be a long war. Though they had long since retreated from galactic affairs, the Jaljiilja showed that they still had an impressive military. In those opening days, we were able to catch a glimpse of just why they were once the most powerful race in the galaxy. Unfortunately for them, and fortunately for us, or so we believed, those days had long since passed. Their most powerful ships could even rival the Feck's, but it seemed most had been poorly maintained. Their millennia of isolation also meant that their crews lacked training and experience. While they were able to put up a semblance of a fight initially, it proved to be little more than a facade that quickly crumbled. Soon the Jaljiilja put up an open cry for help, but we ignored it. Our combined fleets, upgraded with Feck technology, were tearing through their defenses with ease. None would aid them. None would want to make an enemy of the Feck. It would be suicide. Again, such is what we believed at the time. We ignored the single solitary return message to the Jaljiilja's cry for aid, one that originated from a distant, fractured species that called itself humanity. The response was simple: "We're coming." Soon after, we received a message from the Jaljiilja practically begging us to end the war. This wasn't surprising, but we were puzzled by the tone of their message. When we first read it, we thought that they believed we might be willing to back down now that they had an ally. But as far as we could tell, we had no reason to do so. Humanity only appears sporadically in the records, always seeming to devolve into their own internal conflicts. Furthermore, the records suggested some hostility between the two. How much aid would humanity actually send? And even if they came in earnest, what could they hope to achieve? However, what confused me about the message was that the more I read it, the more the tone appeared to be apologetic. Then came the Battle of La Liga. La Liga was one of the Jaljiilja's main systems. Knocking it out would open up a path to their homeworld. So they were desperate to defend it, expecting stout resistance, and not entirely sure what form humanity's aid would appear as. The Feck sent in a massive fleet, bolstered by 5 times as many auxiliary forces. It was a sight to see. Over 1,000 capital ships in total, not counting the escorts. Entire factions had fallen to less. The Jaljiilja had no chance of surviving, no matter what reinforcements came to their aid. We were certain of this. Our fleets arrived and prepared to move into position in the system. A single human vessel, a drone relay, entered the system and hailed us on an open channel. The Feck Admiral responded, "This is the Imperium of the Reconciliation. State your business here," he demanded. A human appeared on the screen, an old, withered man from the look of him. "Imperium of Reconciliation, this is Admiral Null of the Grand Alliance Navy." He seemed to have to take a moment to remember the name of his faction. That was a bit humorous. "You are trespassing in restricted space. State your business." Despite his age, the man spoke with an authority that seemed to surpass even that of the Feck Admiral. "We are here to bring the petulant Jaljiilja to a heel." The Feck Admiral spat these words, as though it were an insult to have to answer. The human shook his head. "Your reason is invalid. Leave the system now, or you will be considered a hostile entity, and we will respond with lethal force." "Why?" the Feck Admiral demanded. "Why would you go to such lengths?" The human looked at the Admiral with a stoic expression. "We are owed a debt, and none may interfere until it has been paid." "A debt?" The Admiral seemed incredulous. "Is that all?" He reclined in his seat. "Tell me, human, what is this debt? Surely anything it might be, the Feck can—" "It is a debt of blood." The human cut off the Feck Admiral, his words striking like steel. "Now that you are aware, should you interfere, it shall be seen as the Feck having taken the Jaljiilja's debt upon themselves." "Listen here, you mongrel!" The Feck Admiral launched into a tirade, but the human Admiral had already cut the transmission. That didn't stop the Feck Admiral, and several minutes later, when he finally finished, or perhaps finally realized that he was talking to no one but himself, he ordered the relay drone to be destroyed. A single shot was fired, and it became nothing but debris floating in the system. "Advance!" the Admiral ordered coldly, and the Armada began to approach towards La Liga. As if on cue, human ships began arriving in the system, again and again and again. They were crude, simple things, little more than massive guns with engines and a bridge strapped to them. A handful of point defense weapons mounted on their sides. Only the bare minimum was done to make them look like an actual ship, rather than something a child might build out of scrap. It would have been laughable, if not for the fact that against our armada of over 1,000 ships, there were millions of them, and at the very least, they all had one massive gun. The next 3 hours cemented the galaxy's fate. We learned a few things from their opening salvos. Firstly, the guns all their ships possessed were no less powerful than our own main cannons. Secondly, they had apparently invested quite a few resources into a rate of fire of those cannons, while each of their ships only possessed one cannon, versus the dozens such weapons some of our larger ships possessed. They could get off 3 or 4 shots in the same span of time it took us to fire a second shot. Finally, their relatively small size gave them a high delta V, making them difficult to target from a distance where our own ships were sitting ducks against their weapons. And while our ships were better shielded against that much firepower, it didn't matter. The humans swarmed our fleet, overrunning us with their numbers. Before long, the Liga system bore hosts to dozens, then hundreds, of ephemeral stars. Ships' reactors exploded violently into the void, as the crews were snuffed from existence. Not even 1/12 of the Armada managed to escape, all of the surviving ships being badly damaged. After this, I defected. I didn't go anywhere, I simply left. The Feck was soundly defeated. Also, I've been told. The species who willingly joined them fled back to the Federation, begging for protection, while those that had been coerced found their salvation amongst the human governments. There was even a brief war between the humans and the Galactic Federation. That ended as quickly as their war with the Feck had ended. Soon the galaxy around me began to change. Everywhere I looked, I can see that old human's face, though the body often varies. Sometimes it's split, sometimes it's rotund, sometimes it's lanky, other times it's curved. But it's always there, always his face. the face of a human. And in my mind, a single phrase constantly echoes, a debt of blood is paid in blood. Humanity remembers its debts. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.